I didn't expect that day in court to change lives. Least of all mine. I had shown up early. Quietly. Dressed conservatively in a gray blouse and slacks, with a folder of documents I had reviewed 100 times. The case wasn't even about me. I was just a witness. A background figure. Or so I thought. The courtroom was chilly, dimly lit by old fluorescents that hummed like they disapproved of everyone inside. People shuffled papers, whispered nervously. The bailiff, tall, broad-shouldered, with a badge that seemed to gleam more than it should, watched everyone like a hawk. Then he saw me. I was seated alone in the back row. He walked over with heavy steps, scanning me up and down like I didn't belong there. I offered a polite smile. "You lost, ma'am?" he asked. Not kindly. "No, sir," I replied softly. "I'm here to testify on case 32B. He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "Let me see your ID," he snapped. I reached into my purse, handed it over calmly. His eyes scanned it, then narrowed. "This isn't real," he muttered, just loud enough. People around turned their heads. "You trying to pull something?" "No, sir," I said again, quieter this time. He raised his voice. "Security. We've got a potential issue here." People were watching now. A clerk peeked out from the hallway. A couple in the second row leaned away from me like I'd grown a weapon. And the judge hadn't even walked in yet. I sat frozen, heat rising in my face. My name was real. My ID was real. But none of it mattered as long as he assumed otherwise. Then, right as he motioned for backup, the courtroom doors opened. And in walked the judge. Everything shifted after that. The courtroom stilled as Judge Franklin emerged from chambers, his black robe flowing like a curtain of finality. He was known for being stern, sharp, and impatient with anything that threatened the rhythm of his courtroom. The officer, whose name tag read Reynolds, lowered his voice but didn't move away from me. Instead, he whispered something to a second bailiff who had just entered. Both of them looked at me like I was a problem that needed removal. I stood slowly. "Your Honor," I called out carefully, unsure if I had the right to speak yet, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Judge Franklin hadn't even taken his seat yet. He paused, then looked straight at Officer Reynolds. "What is this about?" "She's presenting suspicious identification, Your Honor," Reynolds said loudly. "Claimed she's a witness for 32B, ID doesn't check out." I blinked. "Sir, my ID is valid. I've already submitted my clearance through the court liaison. I was asked to appear by counsel." The judge's brow furrowed. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" I didn't hesitate. "Dr. Lenora Hale. Licensed forensic linguist. I was asked to verify authorship in a key piece of written evidence for this case." A silence swept across the room. Reynolds stared at me. His mouth opened, then closed. The other bailiff looked uncertain. Judge Franklin turned back toward the bench, motioning for his clerk. "Is that true?" the judge asked. "Did counsel on 32B request this witness?" The clerk flipped through a folder, her fingers moving fast. "Yes, Your Honor," she said after a tense beat. "Dr. Hale is pre-approved. She's on the docket and was cleared by security yesterday." Judge Franklin slowly turned his gaze back to Reynolds. "You interrupted my courtroom, for this?" Reynolds stiffened. Her demeanor was evasive, "Sir." She appeared out of place. "Out of place?" Franklin repeated, his tone suddenly ice-cold. "A credentialed expert witness?" I sat back down quietly, not saying a word. I didn't need to. The air was shifting, heavy with unease. And the unraveling had just begun. The silence that followed was jagged, not the kind that brought peace, but the kind that pressed on everyone's nerves. Judge Franklin's jaw tightened. Officer Reynolds approached the bench. Reynolds hesitated. Then he walked stiffly forward, his boots echoing on the tile. The judge leaned slightly forward, his voice lower but still audible enough for everyone to catch the edge. Explain to me how a court-cleared expert, sitting calmly in the gallery, prompted this kind of disruption. Be precise. Reynolds swallowed. She didn't match the profile I was given. What profile? The judge asked sharply. The officer paused, struggling for words. She didn't look like a court-appointed academic. Murmurs rippled through the room. Franklin sat back, folding his hands. So your decision was based on appearance? Reynolds didn't answer. He didn't have to. The judge turned to his clerk. Get me the pre-approval paperwork. All of it. I want to know who sent it, who signed it, and how it didn't make it to Officer Reynolds. The clerk nodded and rushed out. Then Franklin looked at me. Dar. Hale, I apologize for the disruption. You should have been treated with the respect your position demands. I gave a small nod. Thank you, Your Honor. But his tone shifted, not toward me, but toward something else. However, he continued, this lapse in protocol suggests there's a deeper failure in communication. And I intend to get to the bottom of it. He gestured to the bailiff by the door. Clear the first recess courtroom for private review. We'll resume the case after this matter is addressed. Officer Reynolds stepped back, visibly rattled. I gathered my things, not out of fear, but because I could feel it now. This wasn't just about me anymore. The moment had cracked something open. And soon, what lay underneath would come spilling out. They moved us into a smaller adjacent courtroom, just the judge, Officer Reynolds, the senior bailiff, the court clerk, and me. The walls were tighter here. The lights buzzed louder. The truth, it seemed, didn't need a crowd. Judge Franklin sat at the center with a look that had gone from irritated to calculating. He'd seen enough of these moments in his career to know when something was off, and now, he wasn't just annoyed. He was suspicious. Clerk, he said sharply, read the security clearance entry for Dr. Hale. She pulled up a printed form, reading quickly. Dr. Lenora Hale, expert linguist. Cleared by Senior Counsel Mark Richter on June 10, approved by Internal Security on June 12 at 3:47 p.m. Notified to court staff on June 13, badge access granted and temporary credentials issued. Judge Franklin raised an eyebrow. Officer Reynolds, were you informed of this? Reynolds shifted in his stance. No, sir. I never received that update. Who was in charge of briefing you on expert witness access this week? Reynolds hesitated. That would be Deputy Marshal Klein, sir. The judge leaned back slowly. Interesting. Because Klein's signature is on the access log. Right here. He tapped the document the clerk handed him. Reynolds didn't respond. Judge Franklin stared hard at him. So either you're lying, or someone in your chain of command is trying to cover their own incompetence. The tension wrapped around the room like a noose. I sat quietly, watching. And then something happened I hadn't expected. The clerk, flipping through a supplemental folder, blinked and spoke up. Your Honor, there's more. Franklin motioned. Go on. There was a request filed yesterday to remove Dr. Hale from the witness list. My stomach dropped. What? The judge barked. It was unsigned. Anonymous, the clerk continued. But it was routed through the internal admin system using an outdated clearance code. It was flagged, but not followed up. Judge Franklin's face went still. Then slowly, very slowly, he turned toward Reynolds. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Reynolds' lips parted. And that's when the unraveling truly began. Reynolds' face flushed a dark red. His posture stiffened, like he was preparing for an attack, or bracing for the blow of one. I have no knowledge of that request, he said, his voice tight. But Judge Franklin wasn't buying it. Then you won't mind handing over your access logs, email activity, and badge swipe records for the past 72 hours. We'll let the court's IT and internal affairs team look into this properly. Reynolds opened his mouth to object, but the judge cut him off with a firm gesture. Enough. Sit down. Reynolds obeyed, jaw clenched. Then the judge turned to me. Dr. Hale, if you're willing, I'd like you to remain present for this review. Your perspective may become more relevant than we first assumed. I nodded. Of course. Franklin tapped his pen against the bench, deep in thought. So someone, for whatever reason, attempted to erase a legitimate expert from my docket. Then, this same expert is publicly humiliated, detained, and accused of fraud in open court. He looked up at Reynolds again. Either you acted on someone's instructions, or you're freelancing beyond your authority. Reynolds didn't respond. The bailiff near the door finally stepped forward. Your Honor, he said quietly, for what it's worth, I saw Reynolds speaking privately with Deputy Klein in the hallway about 30 minutes before court started. Seemed intense. Franklin nodded slowly. Noted. I'll be issuing a formal hold on both Reynolds and Klein for immediate review by judicial oversight. He stood. This court is adjourned until further notice. Dr. Hale, your integrity and patience today have revealed a matter far larger than anyone anticipated. You've done this court a service. As I gathered my things, I felt the weight of it settle over me. Not just the vindication, but the exposure. Someone had tried to silence me. And now, their web was beginning to collapse. I stepped out into the hallway, the courtroom doors closing behind me like the end of a chapter. But it wasn't over. A court liaison jogged up to me before I could reach the elevators. Dr. Hale, Judge Franklin asked that you wait in the witness lounge. There's someone from judicial oversight who wants to speak with you. I nodded, still processing everything. Less than an hour ago, I was nearly removed from court for doing nothing more than showing up. Now, I was a key witness in what was shaping up to be a judicial misconduct investigation. In the lounge, a woman in a charcoal blazer introduced herself. I'm Dana Carr, Internal Oversight. May I ask you a few questions? Yes, I said, setting my things down. Of course. She flipped open a small leather notebook. When Officer Reynolds confronted you, did he say anything suggesting he knew who you were before you identified yourself? I thought back carefully. No. But he assumed I didn't belong. He said I looked out of place. Carr jotted that down without expression. Had you ever interacted with Deputy Klein before today? No. Never met him. Carr flipped a page. We just pulled clearance records. Klein had administrative access to court appearance logs, but not clearance revocation authority. That means the attempt to erase your name was unauthorized, and traceable. Her eyes met mine. This wasn't just a mix-up. Someone wanted you out. I sat back, stunned but not surprised. Why? I asked. Carr gave a small, tight smile. That's what we're going to find out. But based on what you were scheduled to testify on, I'd say your analysis may have struck a nerve. My report, the reason I was in court, was a linguistic breakdown of internal memos tied to a whistleblower case. It wasn't public yet, but someone clearly wanted it buried. Carr closed her notebook. Rest assured, this won't disappear. Not this time. As she left, I finally allowed myself a breath. Whatever they had tried to cover up, they'd failed. And now, the fallout had only just begun. An hour later, I was escorted back into the main courthouse, not to testify, but to observe. The courtroom was now filled with unfamiliar faces, members of judicial oversight, senior court officers, and a state ethics commissioner. The energy had shifted. It wasn't routine anymore, it was investigative. Judge Franklin entered, not with his usual confidence, but with the quiet weight of someone who realized the system under him had been compromised. "Before we resume any proceedings today," he announced, "this court will address a matter of internal interference that has directly impacted its integrity." All eyes shifted to the defense table, where Officer Reynolds now sat, not as a courtroom enforcer, but as a subject of scrutiny. Next to him sat Deputy Klein, summoned in under emergency order. The Ethics Commissioner stood. "Both Officer Reynolds and Deputy Klein are being placed under formal inquiry for unauthorized interference in court procedures and attempted suppression of a verified witness." Klein's lawyer, seated beside him, immediately objected. "There's no proof my client engaged in anything illegal." But the commissioner raised a tablet. "Court IT logs show access to Dr. Hale's clearance file at 10:14 p.m. the night before her appearance, from Deputy Klein's credentials. Moments later, a removal request was sent from an unverified account within the same building, using an outdated access code." He turned the screen toward the judge. "We have confirmation Klein's badge was used to enter the server room that night." A gasp rippled across the room. Judge Franklin leaned forward slowly, locking eyes with both officers. "This court has been undermined, and every decision connected to this case is now under review." Then he turned to me. "Dr. Hale," he said, his voice steady, "please know that your voice here exposed a rot none of us saw. And I intend to make sure this never happens again, not in my courtroom." I gave a quiet nod. But inside, I knew this went deeper than just two men. Because what I uncovered in those documents, it threatened more than just reputations. It threatened careers. And someone had been willing to gamble everything to silence it. After the hearing recessed, I was escorted to a secure meeting room. A man in a dark blue suit was already seated at the table, reviewing a thick folder of documents. He looked up and extended a hand. "Special Investigator Damon Reeves," he said. "State Integrity Division." He motioned for me to sit. "Dr. Hale, I've reviewed your analysis, the one tied to the whistleblower memos. I believe we now understand why someone wanted you out of that courtroom." He opened the folder and flipped to a page I recognized, a side-by-side comparison of two nearly identical internal memos, one authentic, one doctored. "The altered memo," he continued, "was entered as evidence in a previous high-profile case tied to a land procurement contract. Billions were on the line. Your analysis proved that the wording in the fake memo didn't match the linguistic patterns of the supposed author." He slid a second document toward me. "And that forged document was introduced into evidence by a legal team with connections to Deputy Klein's brother-in-law. A private consultant who benefited from that ruling." I stared at the page. It all fit, too well. Reeves went on. "We believe Klein's motivation was to discredit or delay your testimony before this court connected the dots. Officer Reynolds, it seems, either acted on instruction or simply took it upon himself to enforce an assumption, and made things worse." I said nothing at first. The pieces were falling into place, fast. But my gut told me there was more. "And Judge Franklin?" I asked. He seemed surprised. "But this happened under his nose." Reeves nodded. "The judge is being investigated for possible negligence. At the very least, his court was compromised. Whether he ignored signs or was completely blindsided, we're about to find out." He leaned forward. "We'll need your continued cooperation. Everything you know, everything you saw, it's critical now." I agreed. But as I signed a statement of cooperation, one question still echoed in my mind. If this was just the tip, how deep did it really go? The following day, the courthouse buzzed like a disturbed hive. News of the investigation had already leaked to the media. Reporters clustered outside, cameras flashing as names were whispered, reputations speculated over. But inside, the real tremors were just beginning. Judge Franklin called an emergency closed-door session. He looked worn, the confident precision that once defined him had given way to something far more human, doubt. "This court is now in extraordinary review," he announced. Due to the compromise of evidence, tampering of witness access, and a breach of internal protocol, all cases handled under Deputy Klein's supervision in the last 18 months are being reopened. A collective inhale rippled through the room. A list of names flashed on a monitor, dozens of cases. Each tied to powerful defendants, each with suspiciously narrow verdicts. Some involving land deals. Others involving contract approvals, public funds, quiet settlements. It was bigger than anyone imagined. Reynolds sat pale and stone-faced, knowing his role was no longer just a moment of misconduct, but a chain reaction in a much larger machine. Klein, now suspended without pay, stared straight ahead, eyes hollow. I remained seated near the back, anonymous to the room but central to everything. I wasn't sure whether to feel vindicated or afraid. Judge Franklin continued, his voice steadier now. This court failed in its duty to safeguard truth. We allowed assumptions, unchecked power, and personal connections to distort justice. But that ends today. Then, for the first time, he turned directly to me. Dr. Hale, you were not just a witness to a crime. You were nearly the victim of one. Your persistence brought this corruption to light. And this court owes you a debt. A few murmurs of agreement echoed among the observers. But I knew it wasn't over. Truth had broken through the surface, yes, but consequences? Those were still coming. Weeks passed. Deputy Klein was indicted on multiple charges, including obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. His connection to the falsified memos opened the door to a full-scale investigation into an influence network that reached beyond the courthouse, into private contracting firms, legal consultancies, even city government. Officer Reynolds, facing disciplinary hearings and civil liability, accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony. His records confirmed that he'd received verbal instructions to flag and delay certain witnesses, particularly ones who might challenge sensitive evidence. My name had been one of several. Judge Franklin submitted to an ethics review and was cleared of direct involvement, but not without consequence. Though allowed to keep his seat, he issued a public statement admitting failure in oversight and voluntarily recused himself from whistleblower and corruption-related cases for the rest of his term. And me? I returned to my quiet academic work, but things had changed. I was asked to consult for the State Integrity Division. My linguistic methods had proven not only useful but powerful, capable of exposing hidden hands in high places. Still, I kept thinking back to that first moment. Sitting alone in the courtroom. Being looked at like I didn't belong. One decision, to speak, to stand my ground, had triggered an avalanche. And now, with every new document I reviewed, every new name that surfaced, one truth became clearer: silence protects systems. But one clear voice. It can bring them down.